One of the hardest seam finishes to do is the bias binding seam finish. And you use this fabric, which is called bias binding. It's actually cut on the diagonal, so you can see that the grain lines, when you look up close, the grain lines go across on a diagonal, and that's called cutting on the bias when you cut on a diagonal. What you want to do is you want to press open your seam, and you should be able to do this just with your thumb. If you want to, you can use an iron. And then you want to put your bias binding over the edge of your fabric, lining up the centre bit, which is the bit where the folds meet, over the edge. And then you can pin all the way down. We're going to sort out the ends in a second. Again, remember to pin at right angles so that you can use the sewing machine just to go straight over the top of the pins. If you pin along the seam, so with the side of the raw edge, what you're more likely to do is get the needle trapped on a pin and it will break the needle. So you want always to put your pins at right angles with the edge of your fabric. So once you've pinned all the way along, you can then come back to the ends to make those look neat. So one last pin. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this end, and I'm going to take the pin out here, and I'm going to fold that edge inwards and then fold back over. That will give me a really neat edge on the end of my bound seam. So again, on this end, I'm going to take that last pin out. I'm going to open up the bias binding. I'm going to fold it inwards. Again, use your thumb just to press it, and then fold back over, and it gives you a really neat edge. What you want to do when you're sewing this is line up with the edge of the bias binding here, the inside edge, not the outside edge, this inside edge. So we're going to put it under the sewing machine, and I'm going to get the centre marker on my sewing machine lined up with the edge of the bias binding. And again, you'll need to do reverse stitch at the beginning and the end, and it's just a case of going slow and steady and keeping it along the edge of that binding. You can see that my needle just jumps over my pins because they're at right angles. I'm going to take that one out because it's getting a little bit caught. And then at the end, a bit of reverse and forward. And there you have your bound edge. This would be used for more expensive clothing because it will incur more costs to do this kind of finish on seams. And it's also used for materials that fray a lot, so woven, thickly woven materials like wool and things fray a lot, so it's a good idea to use this kind of finish on those kinds of materials. Just need to snip off the ends and then do the other side, but make sure you pull it out and you don't sew with it on the other side of the material.